Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to the first roundtable about the Cyber Resilience Act proposal. We are live from LPI's Zoom webinar platform to start this conversation or restart with some of the people involved the conversation about the CRA. The Cyber Resilience Act is a European law proposal that is possibly going to cause some hiccups, if it's not worse, to the open source environment in Europe. And we are trying as LPI to address these with monitoring the situation around the CRA. We are here with a full room of panelists who are involved on different aspects and different areas of the open source and Linux business. I will start presenting my colleagues who are Elżbieta Godlewska. I hope the pronunciation is okay, Elżbieta, business development specialist for the Linux Professional Institute. Thank you, Elżbieta, for joining us. Alex Lamberton, Communications and PR Executive of LPI. Myself, Max Roveri, I am a Community Manager in LPI. And then I will start giving the mic to our speakers for today, our panelists. I will quickly present all of them, and then we will start with Ivan with a quick presentation about the reason why they are here and who they are. Okay, so I am very happy to introduce you to Ivan Sanchez Ortega, and I'm going to mention his very important job description from LinkedIn: Ninja Pirate, Robot, Unicorn, Rockstar. Moreno Razzoli, YouTuber, FOSS advocate, and LPI's Platinum Channel partner, and maybe you know him already as Moro Linux. Ingo Wichmann, again, I hope the pronunciation is okay enough, Managing Director at Linux Hotel. And last but not least, Andrea Palumbo, a lawyer, an Italian lawyer, expert in digital rights. Ivan, please go ahead with telling us something about yourself. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Max. So my name is Ivan Sanchez. I have been in the OpenStreetMap Foundation for a number of years. I was involved in the Open Database license change that took place more than a decade ago from the Creative Commons to the ODBL. Then I moved to maintain a JavaScript library called Leaflet to display maps in websites. And then I moved most of my time to the Open Source Geospatial Foundation, or GEO. In other words, we make maps. I make maps. I make software that displays maps. And this software is used routinely by, among other institutions, mapping agencies all around Europe, such as the Spanish National Geographical Institute, meteorological agencies, and Frontex, the guys who monitor the borders and so on. And one specific use that I could find is Frontex uses my work, right? They do use Leaflet, they do use OpenStreetMap for the maritime borders. I was responsible at one time at drawing the territorial water borders between Gibraltar and Spain, so I know they use my work. And my fear is the nightmare worst case scenario that at some point in time, my software can fail, because every software can fail, and then Frontex cannot operate, and because of that, I will be liable for 2 tons of cocaine entering the Europe. And I don't want that, so I'm worried.
Thank you, Ivan. Very clear with your position. And Moreno, to you. You are on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. I hope you can at least see my screen. And
yes.
Okay, I'm a long time for my age a Linux user, and I create educational content on YouTube, and I also make courseware and teach courses in class. So I basically I'm looking at the edu space, primarily at open source software, free and open source software. I'm a huge fan of open source. Matter of fact, I've contributed and in many open source projects and started my own. And I'm a bit worried about all this stuff because I don't want to be liable for stuff I've shared out of genuine, um, spirit, just to be liable of something I couldn't see because someone else can do anything with my software. I'm also here because I've started the conversation about the CRA in Italy, at least. I made 2 educational videos about that, an overview and featuring with the avvocato lawyer Palumbo. And that's it.
Thank you, Moreno. Ingo, please, to you.
So this is my profile at Mastodon. I usually try to be part of the solution, not so much part of the problem. So it's not a LinkedIn screen that you see here. Well, I'm working with open source software since beginning of the 2000s or so. And the company I work for is called Linux Hotel. We're also LPI Platinum partner. So we're doing all kinds of open source trainings and of course LPI trainings among them. You may have noticed me somewhere around Linux Tag. Linux Tag was an event that we organized for quite a long time, and it had up to 20,000 visitors. And well, we did this in our spare time. Well, you can imagine that handling so many visitors and so many exhibitors is quite a hard job. So from one time in 2015, we started supporting other conferences. So that's I had some spare time after no longer organizing Linux Tag myself or ourselves. So I put more effort in my activities at the Open Source Business Alliance. Open Source Business Alliance is a German association of mostly companies that want to promote open source business, open source software business. And one thing that I want to refer to later is that we work on the topic of Cyber Resilience Act since, well, beginning of this year. And because, well, we have here not only members from Germany, I would like to give a hint on our parent association or European Association, APEL, where all the European organizations are coming together. So the French, the German, and so on. Well, that's more or less what I do, giving trainings, organizing trainings, and doing lobby work for open source software in Germany. That's mostly it.
Thank you, Ingo. Andrea, it's you. I guess I have to share my screen, right, for your presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
So, hello everybody. Thank you for inviting me. My name, as you see, is Andrea Palumbo. I'm a lawyer. I'm happy to be here, even though it is not common to see a lawyer in this kind of situation. But I can say I'm a digital lawyer. I specialize in cybersecurity, privacy, and technology matters. And I am here, first of all, because I am an open source and free software supporter, and then also because as Moreno said, we started a conversation on this topic a few months ago on his YouTube channel, and it was a very nice conversation.
Thank you, Andrea. And I think that you are the perfect fit to start the conversation between you panelists, because again, you are the lawyer, you are the avvocato here, okay? So you are monitoring with a very with a very high attention about what is happening in Brussels around the CRA, because it can change the laws that are applied in the field when it comes to free and open source business, and not only the free and open source. So if you want to give us a wrap up, something like the story so far, what happened until now, what is supposed to happen?
Yeah, just a few words. I can give you an overview on the Cyber Resilience Act, and then I will leave the floor to all other panelists. I'm not sure that everybody knows what Cyber Resilience Act is. It is a regulation, a draft regulation that was presented in September 22 by the European Commission. It was presented in the context of the so-called digital single market strategy of the European Union. And this regulation, so let me read the text. The main goal is to create the conditions for the development of secure products with digital elements by ensuring that hardware and software products are placed on the market with fewer vulnerabilities. So with this draft regulation, the European Commission wanted to achieve this goal, but the reason we are here is that this regulation sets heavy rules, heavy responsibility on software developers. And according to the draft text of the European Commission that was presented in September 2022, the regulation applies to all software developers. In particular, it applies also to free and open source software developers who are making available on the market their products in the context of a commercial activity. That means that this definition includes also the open source developers that are making available on the market products, and they are charging the consumers for the recuperation of the cost just for this. And for this reason, this regulation raised a lot of criticism by the communities, the free and open source communities. So this is the reason why we are here. But after the presentation of the draft regulation, the Council of the European Union and the European Parliament worked a lot on this draft of the European Commission, almost 1 year. And they made a lot of amendments. In particular, they have taken into account the criticism that were raised by the open source community on the applicability of the regulation. And at the end of July 2022, they presented their draft text of the regulation. And as I said, this draft text, they are not perfect, but they take into account the criticism of the open source communities. And on this basis, at the end of September last week, on the 27th, in the European Union in Brussels, started the so-called trilogue, that is an interinstitutional negotiation where the representative of the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the European Council discuss this regulation, and I'm happy that they will discuss the regulation on the basis of this new draft. As I said, they are not perfect, but both the texts that were presented by the European Council and the European Parliament take into account the criticism that were raised by the open source community. So at the moment, I just can say that they have started this interinstitutional negotiation. We don't have any official news after the first session of negotiation, but we are expecting that the regulation will be officially and formally adopted by the end of the year, or at least at the beginning of next year. So this is an overview on the Cyber Resilience Act.
Thank you, Andrea. Again, to start interacting between the panelists, okay, I would start connecting the dots between what you are saying and what Ivan was saying in his introduction. Okay, he was showing us, okay, the fact that he doesn't want to be dragged into shipping drugs or whatever because of his software. Okay, so maybe he was overreacting or whatever. I don't know, Ivan. Okay, if you want to add anything about this, but
I am obviously exaggerating. This is a nightmare case scenario, but part of my work as a programmer is I have to foresee the worst case scenario for my software. Okay, I have to think what is the most ugly, the weirdest piece of input that my program can take, and my program has to be resilient to that input. That's how I manage security. That's one of my ways of handling security in my software. I have to think about the worst input data that my program has to manage, and that has to be applied to law as well. One of the things I learned in the few past years is that law behaves a lot like software. It's code that handles situations. Okay, so in order for a law to be resilient, in order for a law to be well made, it has to be able to handle the weirdest case you can throw at it, and this is one of these weird cases, right? So I am aware that this is kind of a very extremely unlikely scenario, but the law has to behave well in this weird worst case scenario. And in my opinion, it does not, because the software that I made, it was made in a commercial environment. I was working for a Norwegian company at the time, making this specific piece of software, and then I made it available through this company into the market, whatever that means, because it's available to the world. And then somebody took it and put it into somebody else's systems. But I made that software in a commercial environment. And it's this kind of edge cases which I don't feel comfortable with. I think Ingo wanted to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan. Before going back to Andrea to address your comment, I think Ingo, yes, do you want to add anything on this?
Yes. Well, at the time when you published your software, and I'm really glad that you worked on Leaflet, a really fine piece of software. Thank you very much. You published it under a license, and that license says that you are not liable for anything that somebody does with this software. And well, that's more or less the deal at the heart of open source software, that you do something, well, I hope in the intention to do something good, but we don't know. You do something and you publish it for others to look at it. And this is, to me, it's a question of free speech, that we are allowed to do something like this on the internet. And well, you did it, and you said you don't want to be liable for anything that your software does at the end. And then somebody else took it and made it into a product, and that appears on some websites, maybe. I think you shouldn't be liable.
Let's hear from the lawyer about this. Andrea, what is your advice?
I have a slightly different opinion, but I understand the point of Ingo. I think that somehow we must be liable for what we do, and that is why we need some simple provision, at least. But I understand the point, so I can understand that there can be exemption. For example, if I'm not making available on the market my product in the course of a commercial activity. So if I'm earning money, I think that I should have at least a basic level of liability. But if I'm not earning money, if I'm only charging for the recuperation of costs or completely for free, I think that you're right. Maybe we should exclude these developers from a liability obligation.
Andrea, sorry, I'm trying to dig deeper into this because again, the scope of what we are trying to do here is for us that we seem to be on the other side of this, okay? For us to understand better what is actually supposed to happen, okay? Because again, I can't be sure about the example that Ivan was bringing now because I'm not the lawyer, you are, okay? And what we are trying to understand for the community here is why things could change with the CRA approved and how the extension of the chances would be depending on how the framework of the new regulation is going to be deployed. So are we facing a structural change of what could happen to a software developer in Europe, and why the open source software would be not specifically, not on purpose, but nonetheless more targeted by the CRA or more involved in possible problems because of the CRA?
Well, let's put it simple. At the moment, if you put on the market a software, you are not responsible if there are vulnerabilities and if something happens because of these vulnerabilities. Of course, I'm making it in short. With the Cyber Resilience Act, the European Union want to avoid data breaches and the cyber incident. So they want to put on the shoulder of developers responsibilities for their products. And they want to increase the awareness of the consumer about good products and bad products. So they want, for this reason, impose obligation to apply security measures and to follow the life cycle of software during their life. So for this reason, Cyber Resilience Act will have a strong impact on developers. And the problem is that when we are speaking about developers, we are speaking about big companies, and they have all the resources to do this, to bear the cost of compliance, to hire new developers, and to face, for example, liabilities for vulnerabilities. But if we are looking at the average open source developer, we are looking at the single individuals who probably is doing his job for his passion, for his because he likes it, but not for money, and he has no resources for this. In this sense, I understand the criticism of the open source community that want an exemption for open source developers that are not earning money from their activities. And so I leave the word to Ingo that is not
disagreeing. Yeah. Ingo, please jump in.
Well, okay. I don't think that you paint the right picture of the average open source developer. Many open source projects started like this, and well, we all know names like Linux and the story of Linus Torvalds in a dark winter in Sweden or Finland, sitting there and hacking together the first versions of the Linux kernel, and many other open source softwares started like this.
But
but that's not how most code is written today. Well, we don't know how most code is written today, because nobody is really counting lines in the open source development. But I think the code that is used today on professional products, the open source code that is today used on professional products, in most cases comes from developers who are working for whatever company. Let's have at the Debian project. There's no Debian company, but there's so many companies paying developers to support Debian. If you really have a dig deeper in who's working there, there's so many universities. So I don't like open source software to be seen as something that is worked, that's only developed by people in their spare time. That would really be a catastrophe. Because many products rely on open source software to be responding to security issues. And if you have a look, for example, I just mentioned Debian. There's a Debian security team which does a really good job. Please dig into the panel, or into the people who are sitting in this security team. They are not doing this in their spare time. Most of them are paid for what they are doing. And this is why I think that the first proposal that came out last year on September, they didn't took that into account enough. When I got too involved with the Cyber Resilience Act, and when I started looking at it, was at FOSS. And maybe I can share the link in a minute of the FOSS last year, where somebody from the European Commission was on the panel and explaining what they want to do. Since then, many people talk to the council, talk to parliament, and talk to commission, and explained to them that how open source software is developed today. And so I think the changes that are coming in from the council and from the parliament, they make a difference. They make a step forward from that position at the beginning of the year.
Thank you, Ingo. Andre, I don't know if you want to elaborate after the comment from Ingo. I would want, and thank you, Ingo, for providing the link as well. But I would want to try to bridge again, okay, what is going on, what is possibly going on in Europe, okay, in a few months when the legislation has gone through and whatever, okay, about the fact that, okay, there is a community of open source volunteer developers, which is something that is different from the community of professionals. And they are, at the end of the day, the people who are the LPI certified people, the ones that work with open source and on open source, okay? And they are building up more and more open source projects. And then you have a third party here, okay, that is the closed source software developers, okay? So again, what I'm trying to make as clear as possible for the community is how the CRA would interact on these three different personas, okay? Because again, I can feel like it's easier to get out with it, okay, if you are the lonely volunteer in a shack, okay, and it's okay. But then you are whole companies, okay, the ones mentioned in the URLs provided by Ingo that are open source companies. Okay, you have in entire distributions like Red Hat also. Okay, that they are open source companies by themselves. Okay, and then you have the closed source stuff. So let's try to role play here. Okay, I am a developer, and I have three different hats. How CRA impacts to me depending on which one of the three different hats I'm going to wear. The lonely guy in the shack, the nerd, huge developer in a big open source firm, and the closed source developer. Why there are going to be different impacts? Can you help us, Andrea, in trying to understand better this, why there is a difference? And of course, if you want to address what Ingo was saying.
Okay, I don't have a specific answer because now the things are changing. So this is the main point. So at the moment, we in the European Union, we are discussing on who will be exempted by this, by the application of this regulation. So at the moment, if we look at the draft of the European Commission, the first draft, only the, let me say, the volunteer open source developer was exempted by the application, and only in the case if he was not making available the product on the market in the course of a commercial activity. So only if he was making available the product for free. So this is the first draft that now the European Commission, the European Council, and the European Parliament, they are trying to amend. And this is something that we all hope, because if not, it is a very little minority that will be exempted by the application of this regulation. And in this case, the closed source developer and the open source professional developer will be impacted by the Cyber Resilience Act that, as we said, has a lot of obligation, heavy rules, a lot of compliance costs. So this is the main issue. With the draft text of the European Parliament and of the Council of the European Union, we have extended this exemption to other open source developers. I'm not sure that we are all happy with the new definition of this exemption, but it's a step forward to include a lot more open source developers.
Thank you, Andrea. Ingo, do you want to comment on this?
No, that's perfectly as the same. We have the same understanding here. So the exemptions they were improved by Parliament and by the Commission. Sorry, the Commission and the Council. I think the exemptions and the changes that the Council proposed is slightly better. So when we at the Open Source Business Alliance wrote a statement a few weeks ago to the German delegation that is part of this process, then we asked them to better to even improve this exemptions that are given today. Our position is that software development should be completely excluded from the CRA. And the reasoning why is because we think open source software has the potential of being more secure than privately developed software. So if software is developed in the open, it should not be favored before closely developed software, because it makes software more secure if it's developed openly. And the biggest part of the software today that is today in use, even if we use a proprietary software like Zoom here, it's still the foundations of that software is still open source software. So who should be liable? Liable should always be the person who puts the software on the market. So a company like Zoom takes open source software and builds its product out of it. And then, of course, it should be liable for it, but not open source who contributing to the code, not making a product out of it. If he's only selling support, only making his money on doing support on the software, money from the software itself, that should not be put under the CRA regulation. And I was quite happy to hear that the German delegation totally agrees with us on this point. So I'm quite confidentially looking forward that we can make this exemption more clear in the final text.
Thank you, Ingo. Before dragging into the conversation someone who has been quiet so far, just an extra comment for Andrea. Andrea, is this scenario pictured by Ingo a possible one for having the people sitting in Brussels making this possible? Does it make sense to a mindset that is different to a scenario that is wider because it's about the cybersecurity and the resilience of software?
Well, I think so, because maybe now in Brussels they are understanding the importance of open source software that is running in all public administration. I know that in Germany you have a strong tradition in open source software in the public administration, and well, at least a better tradition than in Italy. And maybe you are more aware that about the importance of this. And since the Germany and other countries play an important role at the European level, I hope that the scenario that Ingo drafted will be the one that we will see at the end of the year. But it's possible.
Thank you, Andrea. And I was mentioning someone who has been very, very quiet so far, and that would be Moreno. Okay, and I would go back before pinging on Moreno to how Andrea you started the conversation. Okay, the fact that now, and correct me here if I'm wrong on the technicalities. Okay, right now the proposal is different from the original one, which was more conservative, which was potentially much worse for the open source environment. And the proposal has changed because, as Ingo was saying about Germany, for example, okay, because the community has been heard, okay, people have been listened to, okay, for once, I would add. And I remember in the first content that Moreno and you, Andrea, developed together. It was an interview. Moreno, I don't know if you want to jump in at this point. It was the original content. Your YouTube video. This is the demonstration that the community can do something.
Well, I think
what I'm trying today. Sorry, Moreno. What I'm trying to say here is there is a word that I hate. Okay, that it's just a label, and you could be labeled as an influencer about Linux and open source. Okay, it's not a word that I like. Okay, but the concept of influence, okay, can be definitely a positive one if you are influencing position and a decision that is going to be better. So what I'm trying to ask you here is how important is to influence through a better understanding of the free and open source environment, and you are an advocate of this, okay? How it is important to do this for the whole open source community and for the rest of the European fellow citizens that possibly are going to have a better environment software-wise?
Well, I think it's vital. Influencer is not a really good term in many ways, as
Yeah.
it grew, some reputation, which is not the best. But advocate and whatever term you like, it's all the same. Basically, you are just trying to deliver a message and hopefully convince someone of the message you are bringing, right? So I think many of the things I told and we discussed with Andrea on that video and on the other content as well was relatable for many people who follow my channel. And I think we can all agree that it's not fair to make an individual developer or even a company that develops on consulting, on a freelance manner to developing something, even if it's not the end point of, like Ingo said, if you are the one who is putting the final product to the wide open public and benefiting from it, by all means, it should be you should have some responsibility. But if you are just developing from such a company, you really shouldn't be uh, eligible to any. Uh, you really shouldn't be. How do you say that? Accused or liable to anything, because I mean that's basically what every professional do. We develop software. Even I mean a doctor, if he mistakes something, he is exempt from all responsibility, and he did the damage to you. Maybe there are corner cases where this is mostly true, others when it's not really. But for most professionals, if they make a mistake, they can get away with it with zero problems. Uh, I don't see why we as developers should be held accountable not only for the mistakes we make, but also for the use that people makes with our software. And as I said, there might be many changes with the current proposal, and perhaps not everything I said is quite accurate even on the original proposal, but uh, what I am trying to say here is that the message was this is unfair and we should fix it. And I got some points. So to me, it's not even influencing. To me, it's just making people aware and and trying to convince at least, because the people is what communities are made of. So you cannot really have community without people. And if we always talk about community and open source community and open source blah blah blah, I mean they are made of people. So if they don't know what's happening or they don't understand what's what's coming, what's happening, it's no use. I see Ivan
Yeah,
raise the
Ivan,
hand.
please.
Yeah, so one of the problems I see with the CRA, and I am talking about a root problem, is that it fails to acknowledge the philosophical nature of software, which is an intellectual property. So intellectual properties don't work like physical properties. In the case of, so to put out a very, very simplistic example of how this whole liability would work. I have here a power supply, okay? If there was a fault in the cabling of this power supply, I would be sure that only this power supply would be affected. However, in software, there is no such thing as this transfer of physical ownership. If a software component of this would fail, it would fail in everything at once, and it could be used somewhere else. In this example, I am the only user of this piece of copper wiring. In the software world, when I make something available to the market, it's not only available to the people who are paying me. It's available to everybody, because that's how we work in free, libre, open source software. So that failure to acknowledge this nature of software is what is, in my opinion, the cause of all the problems with the CRA. And in my opinion, it has to be addressed in order to fix these problems.
Thank you, Ivan. Moreno, I don't know if you want to comment back.
Yeah. That's an interesting take on the situation. I couldn't agree more. I really have nothing to add. It's brilliant.
Thank you. And Ingo, you were saying something about this?
No, I perfectly agree with it, and maybe I even have a question to Ivan, because well, software are ideas, and other people taking your software, they are developing it, they are taking your idea further. So, are you maybe aware of a usage of your software that you didn't expect when you developed it? And I ask this question because if I have a look at your plug that you just showed to us, then the usage of this plug is quite restricted, and it's quite clear what the purpose of this plug is, and there are even regulations what happens if somebody is totally misusing it. But what about a software library? A software library is something that sits underneath the software that somebody else builds upon it, and if he does something totally unexpected to the original developer of the library with it, it may still work in a totally different way that the original developer worked. That's why I asked Ivan, are you aware of a usage of your software that you didn't expect?
Absolutely. In the geographical information world, we make maps. And everybody knows what a map is. It's a depiction of the earth and the land around you. Something that we didn't expect at first is medical imaging. Because when you're dealing with an X-ray, for example, you are dealing with very big images that you want to zoom in and move around. And you're dealing with things like multispectral imaging and MRIs and etc. So it turns out that geographical information system software is really useful for medical imaging. So all of a sudden, any piece of geographical information software can be turned into a medical product, which is another piece of hell when it comes to legislation. Absolutely. And the thing is, when you use mapping software in a medical product, it does not stop being a mapping software. It still can do maps. Remember, this is one of the important things to take into account when you're dealing with this nature of things, right? It doesn't stop being because you use it. It's not a consumption good. You don't consume the good when you use it. And this is when you're talking about physical things, this is also something to take into account, right?
What a beautiful example. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you, Ingo, for bringing this up, and Ivan for addressing this brilliant different solution to a different problem, if you want. Okay, but this makes me to go back to Andrea, because again, I keep repeating myself. We are here trying to make available some insight to the community. Okay, so Andrea, this from Ivan is a brilliant case. You have one solution for two different problems. It sounds great. It sounds amazing. But in terms of the legalese of this, in terms of the applying the laws, and in terms going back to square one, in terms of how this could be an example of how CRA could work. Is this a beautiful dream or a nightmare? For a lawyer and for someone who should go to a lawyer trying to figure out stuff. What is your take on this?
Of course, I'm not able to properly understand all the points that were raised by Ivan and Ingo and Moreno, but let me say something about what the CRA is asking to developers, and I would like to address maybe one of the questions that was coming from the community. So we are speaking about the responsibility of the developer and how we make use of the software. But this is not what is the main goal of the Cyber Resilience Act. The Cyber Resilience Act is imposing obligation not on how people or companies use the software, but on the implementation of security measures to avoid vulnerabilities. So it doesn't care how they will use open source software. But if you are putting on the market software that is where with no implementation of the security measure that are listed in one of the annex of the Cyber Resilience Act, you will be responsible for that if there's a vulnerability and if this is causing damages to other people. So Cyber Resilience Act is not about how other people or companies use the software, but if the developer are implementing the security measure that are listed in the text.
Thank you, Andrea.
I beg to differ on this.
Okay.
I mean, that's a side effect. I mean, if I develop a specific piece of software or library, and I do it without specific concerns for security, because my intended usage is to use it as an offline library, which doesn't connect to the internet and blah, blah, blah. I should be allowed to do that, and everything should be fine. But what happens if a company like Zoom, like we mentioned, takes my library and use it differently from what I conceived it for, and it uses, it incorporates my piece of software in its service or software which connects to the internet and does this, and that, and automatically my security model is not adequate for the usage that they are making. At that point, I become liable for whatever happens if there is a new vulnerability, which I couldn't see coming, and then I am responsible for that. That's not fair. That's not the intended usage I did intentionally think of, and that's my take.
Thank you, Moreno. Before giving the mic back to Andrea, Ingo, please.
I think it's so fair. If you're pro in the market and are making money from it, then it's totally fair that you have to describe what the software is good for. You have to provide documentation and all the things that your users needs to know, so he can know in advance where it's not made to be put into an online product. That is to me one of the things that are part of putting a product market. So you're a supplier of a software and not so much a developer of a software. This is exactly the line that we are drawing. And well, I think it's totally fair to have somebody reliable on software that he puts on the market.
Thank you, Ingo. Andrea, do you want to address these comments?
Yes, probably I don't have, even in this case, all the answer for this. And so let me put it this way. We are opening another big topic about the CRA that is not related to the scope and application of the regulation, but it is related to the definition of manufacturer. That is the one who is bearing the responsibility. So maybe in the next roundtable, we will discuss the definition and the discussion about the definition of manufacturer, because
Why not?
all the obligation, not all, but the main obligation rely on the manufacturer. And we have to understand in the example that Moreno put on the table, if the first developer of this library is still the manufacturer, even if it is included in another piece of software. It's I don't know if we have time today to discuss it, but it's another, maybe the other big problem of the CRA. And at this moment, I can tell you that it is also not clear the situation and the definition of manufacturer and how the obligation will rely on this subject.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, I would have a question which is slightly different, but among our panelists, we have two LPI Platinum partners, both Ingo and Moreno. Okay, I have to ask both of you guys this question. Have you thought already about how the open source certification landscape could be affected, or how it should react once the CRA happens? Is building up knowledge about some specifics, things happening like CRA, something that should be related to the certification? And sorry for the nasty question.
Okay, let me, sorry if I can say something. Let me get this straight. Are we talking about the objectives, the exam objectives or stuff like that for the...
By all means, starting with that.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of, because in the Linux Essentials, we have a chapter where we talk about Linux, no, free and open source licenses. And basically all free software, which I know of at least, starts with no warranty of any kind, blah, blah, blah. So there is the basic exemption for the developer, which has and takes no responsibility for how the software behaves or use, yeah. So that's something that should be noted at that point. If that is superseded by regulatory European law, I think that would mess things up. But yeah, maybe that should be the first thing to be mentioned.
Ingo, thank you.
Yes,
Moreno.
there's this brand new open source essentials certification that was mentioned, and I'm looking forward to take one of the beta exams in a few days. So yes, well, it never stops, and as soon as CRA is really put first into European law, and then it must be implemented by the European governments, and then I guess there will be something that can be put onto this exam, some objective. But until then, I still have many open questions. So, for example, if I, as a training provider, publish on my website a software that shows how software. So maybe you're aware of damn vulnerable Linux project and other pieces of software that you provide just to show how not to do software. Somebody comes with a crazy idea of putting that software into a product. I never want to be liable for something like this because, well, I put it online to demonstrate how not to do it. I see an exemption in the CRA for research, but I don't see an exemption in the CRA for education. That's something that, well, at least slightly could touch the certification and training space.
Thank you, Ingo. I don't know, Andrea, if you want to add something about this. And again, I'm not going to keep the conversation, guys. So for me, you can just go ahead, okay? I know, Moreno, you have a hard stop, but other than that, feel free to go on. Andrea.
I think I said too much. Maybe Ivan wanted to say something. I see he raised his hand.
Sure. It's just that I completely agree with Andrea in the open question of who is the manufacturer. Because we're not dealing with a physical thing, we're dealing with an intellectual property, which is an unphysical, fuzzy concept, which only takes form because we put laws on it. So I think this is a good discussion that can take hours. So just so everybody can have an idea of how difficult this discussion can be is, let's have a book, okay? Let's have this Randall Munro XKCD What If book. Who made this book? This is a very good question. Who is the manufacturer of the book? Is it the print shop? Is it the people who typeset it? Is it the person who wrote it? Is it the people who sent Randall like little weird questions that also have the names on the book? Because when you're dealing with physical goods, like this thing, you don't care where it came from. You go to the people who sold you this. When you have a non-physical good, which is the order of the words in the book itself, the paper is different from the order of the words written in it. So who has made this? Also, when you are using the order of the words in the book, other person can use the order of the words in the book. Also, Randall Munro cannot give the ownership of being the author of the book. It's a very weird work. It's a very weird world, and it prompts a lot of thinking. And I think the people who are writing the CRA or are involved in the CRA, I would urge them to stop for a bit and think on these issues about non-physical things, because it could really benefit from thinking on that regard.
That's the one thing that won't happen because the law to be out by end of this year or maybe a bit later, because next year we have new elections, and then the whole council will be council. I'm always changing it. Parliament, council, and what's the next? And commission. The commission will be set. So if they want to have this law, and I think in total the law is an improvement. If we want to have this law out, then it has to be changed now, and they won't do substantial changes. We can hope that by bringing the law into national law, that by this we can save or at least put in some safeguards. So this is something that we should do in the next years. But well, there will be no substantial changes for now. What I hope that we somehow can learn, or that the European community can learn from that, is that we should start it different next time. We really should talk with the open source community, whatever it looks like. It's a nice word, open source community, but who do I talk to if I want to talk to the European community? Well, I would say to the Appel guys, but of course everybody has a different take on that. It's hard for the Commission to tell them who to talk to, but I hope they somehow learn from that when they draft a law, that they should draft it in a way that considers more of the people who are involved in the regulate or are hit by the regulations that they do.
Thank you, Ingo. We have a question which is open for all of you guys. Okay, from Jody, one of the attendees, and thank you. I'm going to read it. With respect to responsibility, do not put too much on companies. The responsibility in using open source requires participation. For example, in a security list, volunteering to review incoming issues. If a vendor relationship is desired, you can negotiate with someone to participate on your behalf. Who want to address this one of you guys? Maybe Andrea, because again, we go back to the fact that it's always tricky to understand who owns what. Okay, I'm going to leave this meeting later with more headache of how much I started with. Okay, Andrea, it seems so difficult to address a concept that seems so simple: responsibility. Why is that?
No, it's not so simple at all. So
okay.
That is the point. In any
well,
case,
from the philosophical point of view, it seems very simple, but that's another story. Go ahead, please.
No. As I said before, maybe we are confusing the responsibility in using the software and with the responsibility in comply with the obligation of the Cyber Resilience Act that are mainly related to the implementation of security measures. In any case, this does not solve all the problem, because as Moreno said before, maybe when we are developing software, we have in our mind that this software will be used for a specific reason, and we don't have to implement specific security measure. But in my view, we have to keep in mind that according to the Cyber Resilience Act, it is not a responsibility concept that is related to the use of the software, but on the implementation of security measures.
Thank you, Andrea. And if you guys do not have anything to add, I would just touch another hornet's nest. Okay, so I am agreeing with you that probably we are going to need another iteration of these meetings. Okay, but Moreno, do you want to say something?
Well, I wish, but really, I raised my hand just to say, sorry, guys, I
Okay.
need to leave.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed this one and looking forward to a next one. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Joining us.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Moreno. Thank you, Moreno. So while there was a comment that I have lost before from Elzbieta, and of course, Elzbieta, feel free to open your mic. The community can do a lot. Years ago, the patent directive didn't pass because of a strong movement of the open source community. We are here trying to do this exactly, but do you want to say something more, Elzbieta? And again, we are European citizens, but we live in different countries. A question for you would be, what is the feeling that you get from the field where you operate?
Actually, but I'm really sorry because I'm not the matter expert in, not a lawyer, not practitioner. It's just my point of view. And I mentioned the community movement is very important because, but actually the people making law sitting in the European Commission are just people not always as well prepared and not practitioners. So they need the input from people like we have in the panel, like Ingo, like Ivan, and also lawyers who understand the laws and you know all those small details we don't understand many times. So you're asking about how it's seen in the region I'm operating. I'm operating in EMEA, in Europe mostly. I'm Polish, based in Spain, actually, and I have a lot of contact to the companies. And so, yeah, it will, if they don't change the draft, it will affect a lot the companies. And so it's really great that we have these discussions and that we join other organizations or do things together to share the voice and to make the lawmakers understand that this law is not good and why it's not good. So yeah, that's just my opinion, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to support and to share the voice and also to learn more and to understand more. Because if I understand everything that was taught here, so it made me really understand some small things which were not clear.
Thank you, Elżbieta. And both Ivan was first, then Ingo, that you raised your hand. Ivan, please. You're on mute.
Sorry, give me just 1 second, because following on what Elżbieta was talking about, the people involved in writing the CRA are not subject experts. I found the blue book, and in that blue book, which is recommendations for making this kind of legislation, I found this list. So this is the things that the people making the CRA know about. They know about explosives, they know about mechanical devices, they know about things that should raise, that can damage your body, and they know about ships, and they know about things that measure weight for some reason. They don't know about intellectual property, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, and I'm sure they're doing a great piece of work on those fields. They do lack knowledge about intellectual property. It's not something weird to say. You are not subject experts on these things. And unfortunately, that has consequences on how the law applies to non-physical things. So, Elżbieta, you are totally right. They are not subject matter experts.
No, we just hope they will listen to the people like you, Ivan, because yeah. So
no, don't listen to people like me, because I don't know what I'm talking about. I can tell you who you have to talk to, and that's people like Andrea.
Yeah, but there's listening to you, and then you show who they should listen next to. Yeah, so I totally agree.
Thank you.
So, yeah,
Ingo, sorry, Elżbieta, go ahead.
No. So
yes.
I think this initiative is very important. So let's just meet again and again and again. And let's just show them, who they should listen to.
Thank you. Ingo, please.
When I was confronted with the CRA topic in February, then, well, as we are doing open source lobby work since it's now 5 or 6 years that we're doing this professionally, I first thought, okay, from where is this coming? Why didn't I see this before? And how can I react on this? So I was totally think, okay, yes, I knew theoretically before that European politics can influence, of course, what we are doing, but we were always focusing on the German federal level. And now this thing came up, and since then I've learned so much, and I'm really thankful for people from the Apache Software Foundation for looking at the CRA. I'm really thankful for Webmink, Phillips, who is it? Simon Phillips from the Open Source Initiative. I'm really thankful for the OFE mailing list where all these things were discussed. So that's what I call community. All these people, all these organizations that are coming together, and it's really wonderful to see that it's not only me reading through all these. Andrea corrected me when we spoke before. I said articles, and he said, no, it's not articles, it's recitals. And, it's really hard for me. So I'm software development, I'm doing software system administration, and while I'm running a company, I'm not really into that kind of topics.
It's not something that we can do alone.
Yes, and I'm really happy people are so much about European legislation in the last 6 months.
Okay, so I think that we can tell we are probably getting closer to the end of this, I'd say, first iteration of the CRA roundtables. Okay, and I have an open question for you guys. Okay, you just mentioned right a minute ago, Ingo, about the fact that, well, in Germany we started thinking about this in the same terms as the German government works, because at the end of the day you are going to need something that is not a European law, but it's a German law, Italian law, and so on. Yes, it will come after and because of CRA and whatever, but it has to be the Italian, the German, the Irish, and so on. So my open question for you guys, okay, is okay, trying to do some reverse thinking here. Okay, is this can be an opportunity coming from a strong international community, the open source one, okay, addressing this problem that is a European one? Can this one be an opportunity to make Europe more a whole? What I'm trying to say probably is the open source community is free and open. These such powerful words can maybe be useful to the rest of the Europe environment in terms of politics, in terms of social welfare, and so on, because we have something to say. And the CRA, how is it going? Because it's already changing because of the community, is an example of what a community can do. Or maybe I'm just a dreamer quoting more or less John Lennon. Sorry, guys. I don't know if it's even a question, but I would give this to you. And Ivan, thank you for helping me here. Okay, go ahead.
So from my point of view, this is not something that the community is doing, but there are a lot of smaller communities that do not know how to react to this. So, for example, OSGeo, the Open Source Geospatial Foundation, the people in the board, they don't really know how to act. We don't really have in OSGeo a coalesced response to the CRA. I was talking just yesterday with some professional guilds in Spain about the CRA, and there is still no strong opinion or no way forward, no action to take. So there are a lot of smaller communities that don't know how to act, or they are just panicking with no clear path inside. And we would really benefit from a joint kind of way forward. How do we react jointly to the CRA? That's something that I think we kind of lack in the smaller disaggregated communities.
Okay. Just before giving the mic to Andrea, just let me try to address this. Okay, we can start planning the next issue of this series. Okay, Andrea, please go ahead. You are on mute.
Oh, sorry, just a few words. I would say that it is not just a good starting point for a small community or for a big community of open source, but I think that in general terms, the Cyber Resilience Act should be seen as something good for the European Union and for our citizens, because the main goal is to improve the security of our digital products. Of course, there's always an economic interest, but I think that we will have a lot of benefits. Of course, we have to address in the right way the regulation and before it will be formally adopted. But in general terms, my idea is that the European Union is going in the right direction, even though it is a very hard direction.
Okay, before getting back to Ingo, just a question for you, Andrea, as well. So are we going to have you as a guest again?
Well, today it was an ambush, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm happy to come back.
Okay, thank you. Ingo, please.
From the German left-wing community, I can say there's a saying, bildet Banden, and well, I would politically correctly translate it to organize, so as a do organize yourself, and the German chapter of the open source, the OpenApp Foundation, as far as now, I don't know if you can confirm this in FOSS is the German chapter of the OpenStreetMap Foundation, as far as I know, and they are a member at the Open Source Business Alliance also. So if at Ostgeo there's some discussion of where to go exactly and how to react on a CRA, you can ask them. And I think Appel is a really great European initiative that where there's local chapters for every relevant open source project or foundation to attach to, and so I think you're totally welcome to join there.
Okay, so what is your answer if I ask you, are you going to be willing to share more thoughts with us at a later stage in 3 months or something, and bringing new people to the cause and to the conversation?
Yes, of course, you're welcome. I already shared my Mastodon Fediverse profile, so maybe we can interact in the meantime, and I'm really happy to be back here.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'd say it was a very interesting conversation with you guys. I can't thank you enough because literally it wouldn't have been possible without you. And so I leave the mic to you guys if there is any last minute comment or anything.
Oh. If I may, I will follow on what Andrea said, that the CRA is a step on the good direction, and the meaning of the CRA is very good. We all want more security in our things. My issue is, since the CRA is leaving these kind of gaps in between the definitions, things fall between the cracks. There might be people who apply legal engineering to get away without responsibility. And this is going to be the big companies. For example, to give one example, I am aware that the people making PostgreSQL and PostGIS are kind of upset with how Amazon is treating PostGIS and PostgreSQL. So if PostgreSQL fails, who will be responsible? Amazon, because Amazon is benefiting from it commercially and monetarily a lot, or it will be the individual PostgreSQL developers. If free and open source software is exempt from the CRA, how do we ensure that software which is commonly used, like Log4j or libwebp, are secure and safe? How do we do that? I think these are open questions that need to be also resolved. And I will say goodbye.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, everybody. And talk soon. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Great meeting.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Bye-bye.